Body. Welcome everyone. Take two. I am so delighted to be here this evening, and it is actually the 10th in Building Emotional Resilience webinar series. And tonight's guest is someone really, really special. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Sarah McKay. I've just learned it's not McKay, but I've been saying it's McKay. Who is from New Zealand, and the Mackay is a Scottish surname, so hence the pronunciation. So I'm really honoured. I am so honoured to have Sarah. She'll be joining us in a moment on screen. She is an Oxford-educated, internationally respected neuroscientist. She specializes in translating brain science research into really simple, actionable tools. And I think that's what I really love about her work so much. As you know, with the positive habit, it is about making everything as practical as possible. And Sarah really adheres to that from the neuroscientific perspective. She helps people for peak performance, for creativity, for health and well-being. She writes for numerous publications around the world and has been published extensively for the professional audience. Sarah is, as I said, Kiwi born and bred, but she lives in Sydney, Australia. And she lives near the northern beaches, I believe, and loves to go surfing and loves the outdoor life. She's a speaker, she's an author, she's a media personality, and she is founder of Pink Brain, and the Neuroscience Coaching Network has just been launched. And this is something really exciting because this is where it's like a sort of a marriage, if you like, between neuroscience and coaching. So if there's any coaches out there, I really recommend that you have a look at this. And Kieran will put, there's a link there in the chat function. And I'm actually in awe, Sarah, because one of the teachers that she has, one of the lecturers coming on her academy course is Dr. Andrew Huberman, who is an absolute hero of mine. So well done, that's so exciting, and what an opportunity to learn from him. And of course, yourself, Sarah. So she was described, Dr. Sarah McKay was described by Erin Metlock of the CEO Brain Summits as a bright, credible light who stands out in the complex yet fascinating field of neuroscience. Fusing her prestigious academic background with her unique ability to translate complex concepts into words we can all understand. She offers real-world science that we can use to better our lives. So that's something I think that is at the heart of this series. We really want to build emotional resilience, hence, of course, the title. And in terms of the term, if we look at the term neuroplasticity, which is, of course, at the heart of a lot of Sarah's work, it is one that I heard personally for the first time, probably about 10 years ago. And it seemed to me like a form of magic, the idea that we weren't stuck, that we could literally change and rewire the shape of our brains through self-directed experiences, through training, through repetition, through habit. And it's something that has given me so much hope in terms of my own emotional well-being and mental health, and of course then all of my clients. And I can literally feel like I have a different brain, and I know that it is down to so much of work like Sarah and that amazing insight into knowing that it's possible for us to shift our neural networks. Not to say that it's necessarily like a magic wand, but just to know it, I think it just gives so much hope to all of us that we can create plasticity in adulthood. So before I invite Sarah on, I just want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. Please do, as always, keep the chat function going. It's just lovely to have you there. And we really always love to have those chats. It's an interactive session as always. The polls are already live, and I can see that you are already answering them. That's brilliant. And I will have a look at them in a little while and read the results. So that's fantastic. Just to let you know that I'm going to leave time at the end. I'm going to be really strict with myself because I know that the hour is going to fly once Sarah comes on screen. But what I want to do is I want to leave time for you to have some of your questions answered, because this is just such an opportunity for all of us. So what I will do is I will choose and select the questions that are most upvoted. So if you look down below, you can see the Q&A box. So can you please put your questions for Sarah in that box, and then just upvote the ones that are you find, yes, I'd love to know the answer to that. And the question with the most answers will win a 5-week pass for therapy on the couch, my weekly online sessions. So when I'm not here in the office on a Monday, I'm at home on the couch doing therapy with all my lovely community. So that's a little incentive for you. So without further ado, Ciara, would you bring lovely Sarah all the way from Sydney at 7:05 her time?
Hello. Hi.
Good morning.
I'm drowning in embarrassment here after the intro.
Oh my God, no, it's all amazing. And so
you forgot the most important thing that we found out about each other, how we're actually quite well connected socially.
We are, I know. I was going to save that. For now, because it is the most amazing, isn't it? Do you want to share it, Sarah, how we discovered? So basically,
well, I'll tell a story when we were toing and froing about setting this up, and then I went onto your LinkedIn profile, and I think it was like a Friday night. I was just sitting there next to my husband, and I looked through your LinkedIn profile, and my husband's from Dublin, and I went, oh, she's from Dublin. And then I scrolled through, I went, oh, she's done a course with Mary Collins, who's my sister-in-law, who's married to my husband's brother. And then I scrolled a bit further. I went, oh, and I said to my husband, she went to the same school as you. And then he said, well, yeah. He said, what's her name? I said, Fiona, Brennan. He said, oh, we were in the same class.
Yes, I know.
So we've got a number of connections and a number of people that we know. So
we do. It is.
So
I'm
very well connected with Dublin society, as I say.
You really are. It's like I'm getting quite like, you know, everyone's like, yeah, I know her. And then there's the other story. I've been in TK Maxx on Saturday and bumping into a girl that I was in school with and hadn't seen for like 10 years, and is actually very good, has stayed in your house in Sydney. Yeah. So it's just like
I sort of know everyone in Dublin.
Yeah, exactly. My goodness. It's amazing. So what I love to do, Sarah, and people who've been here with me before will know, and welcome to all the new people who maybe haven't been here with me before in building emotional resilience. But what I love to do, Sarah, before I do anything important, and I do believe this is important because it's like I said, it's an opportunity for people to really to learn about themselves, their emotional well-being, their hormones, etc. So I thought what we do is just slow everything down and take 3 full deep breaths. So we let go of where we are the day we've had, and for you, you can just start the morning fresh and with that lovely clear mind. So if everyone is happy to do so, or just to close your eyes or gently lower your gaze and put your 2 hands towards your belly, and we're going to take 3 really beautiful, big, deep breaths into the belly. So breathing in for 1, and then just a lovely slow and long exhale. Just slowly clearing the mind and relaxing the body. As we breathe in for 2. Exhaling fully. And then a 3rd breath, as deep as you can, the deepest yet. And a lovely slow and long exhale. So just allowing this presence and this focus to really help us here this evening as we listen and learn from the lovely, beautiful, amazing Dr. Sarah McKay. Let's open up our eyes. So Sarah, do you know what I'd love to do is start off with telling us a little bit about how you got into neuroscience. And I do believe that it's down to 1 book. So you might share with the audience here.
Oh gosh, yeah,
that story.
Yeah, sometimes I've got it lying around.
Oh, okay, lovely.
Oh, there's me looking on the other side of my computer for the book. I've got it somewhere. I have too many books everywhere, which is not a bad thing. So this is back in the early 90s. You remember those days? That was when I peaked in the 90s. I don't know about you, Fiona, but that was when I peaked.
Okay.
I was at university, first year university, doing a psychology lecture. And well, first of all, in that lecture, we were learning about synapses. My 14-year-old learned about them at school recently, but back then that was university level kind of material. And I thought synapses. God, I just was blown away by how cool that process was. And then in the same lecture, the lecturer said, recommended that if we were interested in learning more about the brain, to go away and read a book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. If you've read the book, you'll understand why I was so captivated by neuroscience from then on. But it was written by a neurologist called Oliver Sacks, who was not only, a neurologist, he was also a great storyteller and wrote these fascinating case studies of what goes wrong with people when things go wrong with their brain. And then in this instance, this was a university professor who lost the ability to recognize everyday objects, and he made mistakes. He thought, lampposts were people, and in this instance he thought his wife was a hat and went to kind of pick her up and put her on his head at the end of a therapy session. And I was so just blown away when I read this book. I moved universities from my hometown in Christchurch, where I grew up in New Zealand, to Otago University in Dunedin. It was only 4 hours down the road, but felt like a big deal, and moved to study neuroscience, which back then in the early 90s was a brand new degree discipline in the universities. And I still, every day now, I'm as thrilled to learn something new about the brain as I was back then, because it's such a big subject.
Absolutely.
We're just learning so much more all the time. Like whole disciplines are still opening up.
Yes.
Which completely fascinate me still.
It is. It's such a great title, isn't it? It's such a memorable title. Like I haven't actually read it, but it's on my list. It's like one of those ones that I know.
And I think it doesn't make sense. Oh, here it is actually.
Oh,
it doesn't make sense. I have to put it up next to me for my camera.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know whether it's around the right way for you or the wrong way.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, we can see it great.
It's kind of a funny title, but then you get it when you read it.
Yeah, well, I think I get it now just from what you said. It was really, really helpful. So what I'd love to do is really focus in on the idea of the impact, let's say, of our hormones on our emotional well-being, and what that link is from a neuroscientific connection or level.
Sure, that's a really really big question. I think it's probably best, the way I always think about it is to sort of step back. If we're going to be talking about the brain and what the brain does and how it kind of creates the experiences that we consciously have or subconsciously have, I always, you've got to kind of take a step back and think about what is the brain doing. And I have a model that I teach that I think is quite useful to conceptualize this. I put the brain in the middle, and this is loosely based, if people are familiar with the biopsychosocial model, but it puts the brain in the middle and it's a bit more straightforward. So I think about the brain sitting, receiving all of this information, constant reams and streams of information from our bottom-up body. So there's information constantly coming in to our brain from our body, and the brain's conversing back. So it's kind of like this enormous, never-ending feedback loop. And some of that information is about hormones, but there's also information about all kinds of things like our blood pH, our the levels of carbon dioxide in our blood, the food we've eaten, things that we may be consciously aware of, which we would call interoception. You've got a full bladder, you've got an aching back, you're hungry, you're full, those types of signals. So there's constant streams of bottom-up data coming into your brain. There's also constant streams of data coming from the outside world into your brain, and that could be that, and that's largely because we are visual animals, humans, that largely comes in through our visual system, but also our auditory system. And if something's up close enough, we can taste it, smell it, feel it. But typically visual is our main sense. And that can be information about other people, information about the sun rising or the sun setting, the built environment we live in. The kind of outside world experiences make our way into our brain through our senses. But then because we're humans, we've also got this peculiar kind of what I call top-down stream of information, almost kind of cycling around and around the brain, that's constantly modifying the bottom up and the outside in. And that's what we might call mind, thoughts, emotions, expectations, memories. And this bottom up outside in and top down streams of information come in. So there's many, many thousands of bits of info in there. What the brain is deciding at any moment in time about what to do next, it's kind of like constantly predicting and making a best guess about what to do next, both in terms of the movements we're going to make to get somewhere else in the world, perhaps some decision-making process, or indeed our conscious kind of feelings or emotions about any particular moment in time are based on all of those pieces of feedback. So there's the bottom up, hormones just one of those signals, all of the outside in context we're in, and then we're filtering that through our previous experiences. If we talk about something like an emotional state we're in at any one moment in time, essentially that's this kind of coalescence of all of these many, 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 many signals. So we like to kind of think, oh, well, hormones and emotions, and what we unfortunately typically do, especially when it comes to women, is go hormones, emotions, bad stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
That seems to be the kind of the message that
I think even when I
receive.
say the word hormone, like it has a
hormone.
Yeah, exactly. It's an immediate, and it'd be interesting to see in the chat function when, you know, just if you close your eyes for a moment, say the word hormones, like what comes up for you? Is it a negative feeling? Is it fear-based? Is it, you know, because I think that there certainly is so much connection, you know, between the time of the month, PMS, perimenopause, and brain fog. And I know that you were involved with some really interesting studies around that whole area, and kind of debunking some myths that you know, in particular the brain, baby brain is one.
Well, I'm writing a whole new book on that. So I've become really fascinated, I suppose, only very recently, because the research has only just sort of started to emerge. For a long time I thought I missed it, but it turns out it wasn't there. This idea around women's brain health, female biology, and, you know, the experiences we have through our lives, the bottom up and outside in experiences we have, and how that shapes how we feel at any one moment in time. What always fascinates me is it doesn't matter whether you're going through puberty. So you're a female, you're going through puberty, your hormones sort of start to cycle. Whether you're going through pregnancy, when you've got the sky high levels of estrogen and other hormones in your body, which essentially are actually brain health promoting and positive emotion promoting. So you've got hormones sort of kicking off sky high, or when you're going through menopause and they're sort of to dial down, doesn't matter whether they're there or not. We blame them for the negative stuff.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And I think that's
ignoring the positive.
That's kind of a cultural message which is not supported by the science. It's almost as if hormones just so, therefore we feel bad. So I think there's a couple of useful studies that we can talk through that I think kind of conceptualize that. So what we'll do at different points in the lifespan. Will that help? And I'll try and be not too long-winded.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Even though this stuff is
I think definitely.
Yeah, so I think puberty, because most of us probably, I can't see anyone on this costume, everyone's gone through that.
I think probably, yes.
Any young
unless there's some mothers and daughters watching.
If there's parents, that's important. It's important to know too. When kids start getting moody, and I have young teenage boys who are 13 and 15.
Yeah.
You know, hormones, and I do not blame anything on hormones. But so studies have been done. Longitudinal studies are really interesting because they often take large groups of people and follow them all the way through their lives. And an Australian study that's been done here looking at childhood and that transition into adolescence and puberty has looked at the emergence of sort of emotional turmoil that we often associate with the teenage years, and has looked at the ages at which children enter puberty and the kind of the emotional consequences of that. So if you imagine a little girl who's entered puberty, say younger than her friends, so she starts to kind of develop early but still normal, so she's just on the early end of the bell curve. So she's actually reasonably more vulnerable to develop depression, anxiety, or just kind of struggle emotionally than her friends who go through puberty the same age as their kind of social cohort, and even the girls who go through a little bit later. But if you look at boys who start going through puberty a little bit earlier with their mates, what happens to a boy when he goes through puberty? I've got two of them at the moment. One's 6'4", the other one's as tall as me. They get tall, they get muscly, they get hairy, they kind of become men. And those boys that enter puberty slightly earlier than their friends rise in social stature versus a little guy who's 16 who hasn't hit puberty yet. And we all know, we're all familiar with them. So you've got children there entering puberty at different points different ages. So when they're experiencing the hormones for the first time, but what actually matters more for their emotional state is the social context in which that happens.
I know, I was kind of like laughing, not laughing, but just thinking how hard it is for guys who reach later. Do you know what I mean? That, and the impact it can have, and the self-esteem, and how they view themselves.
It's difficult. Yep. Difficult for those little guys, and it's also difficult for the girls who go through earlier, whereas the boys.
And why is that for the girls, Sarah? Like, is it because
because they're suddenly, because they're different from their friends, and what happens when you're growing breast, you suddenly start to become very aware of how the world views you in a very different way.
Yes.
And you might have little people there experiencing perhaps the male gaze for the first time, and they're 10 and they just don't know how to cope. So there's that kind of perception. I am changing. How does the world perceive me, and what's happening in my social circle? Whereas the boys appear to do better when they go through puberty earlier, because they become men and they just, like, everyone thinks they're amazing.
So what we're learning there is it's not the hormones, as you say, it's the social context. Right. Okay. And when you said earlier, I don't blame hormones for anything. Like that's amazing, right? To me, that's
and what we see when young people enter puberty is that what the hormones do is it shapes their body, but it also shapes their brain, and their brain goes through this incredibly sensitive phase of development, very similar to the sensitive phase that an infant would go through learning language. They absolutely require the experience to wire up their brain appropriately. And the biggest changes that we see in the brain of boys and girls going through adolescence is the social brain becomes incredibly sensitive to social experiences. And that's typically what drives a lot of the good or the bad decision making, tribe acceptance. You know, my 14-year-old might ring me from the bus and go, "Oh, can you come pick me up from the school bus? I'm so tired," even though it's like 500 meters up the road. Comes home, goes upstairs, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm going for a surf with all my mates." And I'm like, "Oh, I thought you were really tired. Do you need a ride?" He's like, "No, I'm fine, Mum, I'm fine." And he's got the energy to get in his bike and bike down to the beach and surf for 3 hours, because social acceptance, being part of a tribe, is what drives his motivation and what gives him energy. Instead of me thinking he's being a brat or he's hormonal, it's not. It's his brain is behaving actually completely developmentally normal. He wants to connect with the tribe. So hormones are driving those changes. But if we constantly, especially to young girls, push this idea that your hormones are making you moody, we remove any agency that they have over any emotions. You can't do a lot about your hormone status, especially if you're a female and it's cycling through your life.
I honestly wish someone had told me that at 13, because I think it would have really helped.
You're presented with this idea that your hormonal status is having a negative impact on you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
100%.
That's not the kind of message that we want to be giving people about resilience and that. I mean, we should talk about PMS, because that's when people go, "Well, I suffer from hormones." You know, they kind of destabilize me. We do have like a certain sort of proportion of any group of humans who are far more sensitive to something biological, hormones say, and other people who are just totally resilient. I think I might be one of them. Like, I don't kind of notice it. I'm fine.
I have a friend like that, and I swear to God, it's like she's never had. I don't think she's ever experienced PMS. She's nearly 50 with no.
That's kind of me. I'm like,
it's great.
But I try not to use that to color my research. So the PMS study, which I wrote about in my book, was fascinating, because I was going, hormones, emotions. There must be something there, because this is a message that we've all received all over the planet.
Exactly.
And I thought, PMS, that'll be a good one, because surely that's a global experience. And so this blew my mind. The first study I found on this, it was a meta-analysis, which kind of gathers in data from lots and lots of different studies, and it was looking at the reported rates of PMS. We're not talking about post-PMDD, that serious form of mental health issue, but we're just talking about the bog standard PMS. Who in the world suffers from PMS? They went all around the world, looked at all these studies of reported rates. So if you go to, interestingly, France, about 10 to 12% of women there, French women will go, "Wait, I suffer from PMS." Go over the border to Spain, it's kind of around 20 to 30%, which is kind of strange, because they're like, not that far from each other. You go through to some parts of Asia, it's kind of around 50%, US, Australia, New Zealand around 50%, but you go to parts of the Middle East and you're getting up to kind of 90%, even higher. So somewhere between 90% and 10% of women in the world suffer from PMS. And I was like, how can
Yes.
it vary?
It's not in the water. Like what's going on?
It's not in the water. So I kind of carried on my little research study, and there is a women's health psychiatrist in New Zealand, also called Sarah Romans. I became very curious about this idea and thought, it can't just be hormones causing negative emotions. What is this whole PMS thing? So she designed a study called the Mood and Daily Life Study, and hundreds of women were recruited in. They were not told it was a study about PMS. They were told it was a study about mood and daily life. And every day a little message popped up on their phone, and they had to kind of record their mood. And interesting, they were given lots of positive moods to choose from and lots of neutral moods and lots of negative moods. A lot of studies that look at mood will give you like 25 options for feeling crap and one option for feeling good. So this didn't skew it towards only emotions that are negative. Yes. And they were also asked about how stressed they felt, how socially supported they felt, and how physically well they felt, their kind of general well-being. And they also had to record the day of their cycle. And when all of the data was crunched, only about 10% of women showed any clear variation of mood based on hormone status. And those are those women who are going to be more sensitive to hormone fluctuations. So we're not dismissing that exists. However, 90% of women showed no correlation between day of menstrual cycle and mood, but there were some very, very strong correlations. There was a bit of correlation with stress. There was a bit of correlation with well-being, unsurprisingly. However, the strongest correlation was with feeling socially supported and mood. So I kind of said to Sarah Romans, we're having a conversation, I was like, does this mean that hormones don't impact mood? She said, I think what we need to do is to start just broadening our perspective of all of these, as I say, the pieces of information that are coming in that can influence how we feel. And by understanding that how socially supported we feel, how stressed we feel, well-being, they can all influence mood, and actually they probably play a greater role. They're like a louder voice in the crowd than the hormones. And I think that's great news. That's not to say hormones don't impact you, but the things you have agency over, the things you can make choices about, the things you can actually do something about, have a more powerful role to play in how you feel day to day.
Definitely. I think that's the essential message, isn't it, Sarah? It's like you can actually do those things. You can be proactive in your own well-being. Absolutely.
So that's always fascinated me, that and some people get really upset because they say, but my mood's changed by my hormones, and that's fine. You might be super sensitive, and lots of people are. But I don't think that we should be saying that that's the message that we should be sending out into the world, that if hormones are there, they are there to make you feel bad, because they're not there to make you feel bad.
But is it almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, do you think, in terms of people who hear that, and then it could that actually literally have a change in their brain from a neuroscientific level if you heard that as a child growing up?
For sure.
Oh, you're so narky, you're going through, we call it the flowers here in Ireland. You're in your flowers, and it means like you're to stay away.
I'm sure you spend a lot of your professional career unraveling the messages people picked up during childhood, the stories that we're told about ourselves. We have to spend a lot of time unraveling them. Exactly. And I think that if we're going to be telling stories about hormones and emotions, we should be telling the stories that the science is showing us, because there's so much positive in there.
Absolutely.
We only tend to focus on the crap, and that's not the scientifically just so case.
Yes, but then it becomes, unfortunately, a reality that people start to sort of, like, the brain is a predicting machine, so it's going to predict that it's now, I'm in that period before my period, so I'm going to feel narky, I'm going to feel down, I'm going to feel anxious, and it starts to happen.
The follow-up on that PMS study is when the study's repeated and you tell the woman, hey, this is a study about PMS specifically. Well, it completely changes the data. Because instead of thinking this is what, look at your mood, is it every day, we're looking at PMS, then all of a sudden people start self-reporting feeling bad PMS when they think that that's what they're expected to be doing. And that's emotions are influenced by all kinds of things. And we can completely change our emotional state by making quite a small physical tweak. So I think I just really want people to understand that we have a lot more agency over that. This is different. This is different from talking about mood disorders, from talking about depression, from talking about anxiety, from talking
Yes.
about PMDD. I just want to just
Yeah,
highlight
to make that, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
So then how does this translate when we move later on into perimenopause and menopause? Because
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, like I've no like I'm just off the cuff here, wondering.
Not that anyone of our
I think we're
generation would be interested in that.
exactly. I think we are
I'm
similar.
surrounded by 48-year-old women. We seem to be talking about menopause. I can't tell you how many conversations I have with all my friends at the moment. This is really interesting, because we had the dial up during puberty. We haven't talked about pregnancy when you've got stacks of all these feel-good hormones, but we still decide that they're bad. Perimenopause is really interesting. So you've got that kind of, and everyone's more familiar with this now than they used to be even 10 years ago. We've got this phase leading up to our ovaries dialing down egg production and dialing down estrogen. What's really interesting here is most of the symptoms that we see emerge from the brain. They're not ovarian, they're neural. And it's a really enormous brain transition that we see at this point in the lifespan. And I think if we kind of zoom on inside the brain, there's a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, and we understand very, very clearly what kind of perhaps the sort of the first few dominoes are that we might see starting to fall that can cause a lot of the ongoing impacts that we see. So estrogen sets, and so everyone's familiar with the idea of hot flashes, and you kind of wake up with night sweats, you wake up with a kind of freak out, sweating.
I was going to say, were you in my bed last night, Sarah?
Well,
we're not that close.
This is caused, I just know what's going on. This is caused by ovarian hormones, particularly estrogen, help set the thermostat in your hypothalamus. So a thermostat has a comfortable top temperature and a comfortable bottom temperature. So we're all familiar with that. And when you get above your set point, then you start sweating, you start taking your clothes off, and you start behaving in ways to cool yourself down. And the same as when your body core temperature drops below the set point, you put clothes on, you might turn the heating on or jump around or shiver. What happens when you start going through perimenopause is particularly the top one goes down. So what happens is your core temperature isn't getting hotter than normal, but your body perceives a slight increase in your core temperature as you're overheating. And it kind of sends the signal out to your body to do all of the things to cool you down. But it thinks it like, it perceives your core body temperature to be panic stations. And so that's why you suddenly start with all of these physiological responses. And at night, when you are asleep and you wake up sweating, your body has sent the surge of adrenaline through your body to wake you up, because it thinks it's panic stations. So you've got to wake up. So that's why women wake up with this big like, oh my God.
It's like an internal cylinder inside the body. It's like this like huge.
And your body has woken you up. Your brain has sent a message to your body to wake up, because you need to do other things to cool down beyond just sweating. And then once you're awake from that, it's hard to kind of come back down from a big burst of adrenaline. It's not dissimilar from what we might see with people with sleep apnea who like stop breathing, and their body goes, you've got to wake up to start breathing again. And they kind of startle awake, and you get this big surge of adrenaline through your body. And
adrenaline is not very sleep inducing, is it? It's going to have the opposite.
No, it's the opposite, because your body's like, you've got a panic station. So that happens multiple times a night, multiple days a week, multiple weeks, and your sleep is being disrupted time and time again. We all know what it's like if you have one terrible night's sleep. What are the kind of consequences of that? You find it hard to be resilient, to regulate your mood, to eat well, to be well and healthy. You're foggy, you can't think, you can't make decisions, you become forgetful, and all of that compounds. And once sleep becomes disrupted, then sleep becomes disrupted because you start to worry about how your sleep is.
Sleep anxiety.
So we know this is all around hormones, because when you put hormones back into the system with hormone replacement therapy, if that's what you choose to do, and we understand this process quite well, then the thermostat kind of goes back to normal.
Yes.
So it could be that the disruptions in body temperature are having all of these effects. What is also worth pointing out is that not all women wake up with this like, oh my God, at night, but they still suffer some of these other consequences. And it may just be body temperature and sleep are so intimately entwined. They're so important that if you're destabilizing or disrupting your body temperature even a little bit, it's not waking you up, but that's changing those kind of patterns of sleep, you know, deep wave, kind of going into deep sleep and coming back out into REM, what we call sleep architecture. So if your body temperature isn't quite well regulated, your sleep architecture is disrupted, and you'll still feel like terrible crap the next day. It's like if you've had a bit too much to drink, but you still sleep all night, but you wake up the next day feeling like, well, we might as well not have gone to sleep at all because your sleep was disrupted. So it's the same kind of.
So it's the disruption itself. And would that then have an impact on the emotions, if you like? So is it more the lack of sleep with all of these things, whether it's, you know, baby brain or perimenopause, or, you know, is it the lack of sleep that actually makes us feel vulnerable?
That's a really big part of it. The disrupted sleep, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, is an enormous part of it. And if you can get your sleep, like sleep is just this foundation on which all other well-being is built. And it's very hard, and I'm sure you see this in the clinic, to help someone with anxiety, or, you know, someone with a mood disorder. I'm not sure who the people who come to see you are. If their sleep's completely chaotic,
you can't do anything. It has to, it's the number one thing. Yeah,
you've got to kind of get that foundation. So the idea is, if you can get that foundation sorted, and then you can start to address some of the other issues. It's probably core at it, but that's not to say that there aren't other things going on. And also, when you're at our age of life, you know, our careers have taken off, but we've got teenage children, we've got aging parents, and, you know, mine and my husband's parents aren't in the same country that we live in, and our teenage boys just want to hang with their friends, and we're torn in a million different directions. There's a lot kind of going on. So it's kind of a point in time, midlife, I think, to just sort of take stock and sort of see where you're at, and particularly for women, because it's such a big life change. But the really cool thing, let me say this, the really cool thing about our brains when we go through menopause, when we go through puberty, and if you have had pregnancies, your grey matter kind of shrinks down a bit, in a good way, because it's kind of streamlining and getting a bit better at doing what it does. When we go through menopause, our grey matter actually kind of expands a bit. So it's almost like we kind of build a bit of brain matter back in. I like to think of it as like the downloading of wisdom. So, you know, it's not all bad. It's not our brains sort of shrink and shrivel away. Actually, through the menopause, they kind of puff up a bit. They kind of bounce back.
And that's not a message we hear either, is it? It's like, again, it's kind of hidden so often, and the focus on the negative.
That's very new. That research only came out in 2021. So this world of women's health brain research, you know, all of this, you know, puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, as I like to call it, is literally hot off the press stuff. I don't know what neuroscience was doing. I think it's as women have kind of made their way up the ranks, we're able to ask the interesting questions, get the research money in, and say, hey, pregnancy, this might be interesting states to study. You know, women aren't actually a niche.
Absolutely, exactly.
Are going, perhaps you're right. But people still think women's health is a niche. I can't tell you how often people will approach me, you know, they'll want me to give a talk, and I'll say, hey, why don't we talk about this? And they go, I don't think all of our crowd isn't women. They might be therapists. And I'll be like, well, I'm sure most of your clients are women, but it's still perceived as this kind of little niche of you know, interest.
But I mean, for men to know about women's brains is important, isn't it? And I hope there are some men here this evening.
I always say it's for women and men who love them. I'm sure, you know, and a lot of it's just this sort of human information.
I'm just going to read some of the polls here, Sarah, just to get some feedback. So, are you intrigued about how your brain works? Well, there's only 1% said no. I'd love to know why.
I'm sure they would joke. I'm sure they were just trying to see what would happen if they said no.
That's quite interesting. So, number 2, do you practice tools to self-direct positive changes, also known as neuroplasticity in your brain? For example, I said hypnotherapy, meditation, taking naps, learning new things, word puzzles. And 56% said yes. 10% said no, and sporadically, which I think is quite common, 34% said they do.
I would challenge the ones who said no, because they're in this webinar. So, you know, they clearly want to learn something new. So
yes, exactly.
They can tick that off for the day.
Yes. And taking naps, I know I've heard you speak about, and also Andrew Huberman as well, about how important it is for neuroplasticity in terms of that we learn in that period.
Yeah, that's what sleep is, the
That's
price we
when it's
pay for
happening.
neuroplasticity. Yep.
Yeah,
That's when we consolidate all we've learned, whether it be in a short nap, which you have to get right to do well, or at night. That's, you're not going to implement the change. And interestingly, this is just complete random aside. So if someone goes through a traumatic event, sleep will consolidate that. So I know there's a bit of kind of talk out there if someone's gone through trauma, like a car accident, say. It's hard to implement. You can't public health message this stuff, but sleeping after a trauma consolidates as well. So there is a bit of kind of talk out there about keeping people awake after a traumatic event. But that's just an aside to say sleep consolidates memories.
That's really interesting, isn't it? So if someone has just had a really traumatic experience, it's like try to keep them awake for or don't go straight to bed
over that first night.
Right.
But I mean, that's may not be the priority, but we do not, and obviously there's a lot of different types of trauma, and it could, may not be just this one-off single event. But there is research around that.
There's Anita saying Andrew's non-sleep deep rest is really helpful since naps have never worked for me, the NSDR. Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I would like listen to hypnotherapy, for example, or yoga nidra. I know he's also fond of. Do you feel that hormones affect your mood? So this is what we were talking about earlier, and 95% say yes. So that's why I really.
Do they ever impact them in a positive way is what I want to know.
I know. I mean, God, that's why I really wanted to focus on that, because I know how pervasive it is, certainly here in Ireland. So for the ladies, what stage of hormone health journey are you at? So we've got 75% are in perimenopause, and 25%. So that's where this is our audience.
It's interesting.
Feel they suffer from PMS. And maybe do, not to take away from that is a real thing also, and then 7% are trying to get pregnant. So that's a whole, I think you're
cool.
Good, absolutely. Your new book might be helpful with that, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's one for the mothers and mothers to be.
Fantastic. Okay, so you might tell us a little bit more at the end about the book, and it'd be really interesting to hear it. Do you feel that you are resilient to stress? And 9% say yes, 29% say no, and 62% say sometimes. So that's again, and again, it's in context, isn't it, Sarah? Like it could be you're not resilient when, like you said, you haven't had a good night's sleep, or you have a lot of demands on you. You've got your older parents, your teenage kids, it just, all of those different things. Do you take a nap during the day? 6% say yes, 69% no, and 28% sometimes. I'm a big believer in naps, because I just feel it gives me like 2 days. Like I have 2 days every day.
I say the same thing, but it has to be done strategically. It has to be done in the right way. You have to be very strategic. I call it strategic napping. And interestingly, because I'm a strategic napper, and if it ever comes up, a lot of people who nap also sleep very well at night, perimenopause aside, because we have a really strong positive sleep association.
Yes, it's kind of almost like a little rehearsal. You're training yourself, and you get used to letting go.
It's like, little babies, you'd say sleep begets sleep. If they sleep more during the day, they don't get overtired, so they sleep better at night. So
lovely. So I'm going to go to the questions here that people have asked, and just to give you a chance to upvote them. I'm just having a look and see. Take a moment if anyone hasn't voted the questions you think are.
I've had to turn the chat off just because there were so many questions coming through.
I know. Yes. So the questions. I know it can be distracting as our brains are firing here and there.
Because then I'd be too busy jumping in on that. So I've just kind of.
I know. No, good idea, Sarah. I understand. But what we do want to answer your questions, but let's just see what is the ones. I think I see here Fidelma is one of the ones that has come out with 6 votes. I think that's the most. Am I right, Kieran? You can tell me, sweetheart. I think I am. Okay. So Fidelma's question is, what is your thinking on HRT?
My thinking on HRT. So we know we understand the whole neurobiology behind as I talked about, the thermostat in the brain, and it's set by estrogen. So we know that if women are suffering from hot flushes, whatever you call them, and night sweats, that the best treatment, if you fulfill the criteria for that, you don't have other risk factors, etc., then HRT will help with the flashes, with the kind of thermoregulation issues, because it helps reset the thermostat, and that's very well established. Not all women want to choose to take that, and that's a just conversation that everyone has to have with their, their practitioner, their GP, whatever you have in Ireland, wherever you are. And I often say, if you kind of haven't got a good, well-established relationship with a family doctor by this point in life, it's a really good time to start, because it's when you might need to start to have really good, open, honest conversations based on the evidence. There are some risks that will mean that some women aren't suitable to take HRT, but I would be very pro it.
Me
if
too,
I was,
personally.
Yeah. So I don't have an opinion on it. What I understand is the science around that. And I think our generation, Fiona, coming through is so much luckier than 20 years ago, when there was all of this fear and kind of concern around hormone therapy causing so many health issues.
Absolutely,
from the women's health studies that came through. And we understand now kind of what went wrong in those studies. And largely it was women were entering in the trials and being started on HRT in their 60s and 70s, like sort of decades after their menopause. And if they'd kind of, their bodies had weaned off estrogen and then it was put back in the system again at quite a high level, then that was what caused the negative health consequences. Whereas when women are started, if they are symptomatic during perimenopause, there's kind of this golden window in which it's safe to start.
Yes.
So,
I think it's the support you get is so important, isn't it? Like, and having someone there that actually really will talk you through it.
Finding the right family doctor. I have an excellent family doctor. I also, have a great, she's no longer, I would say, she's no longer my obstetrician. She's now merely a gynecologist. And that you can kind of talk through these issues with and get the right support that you need. So I'm pro HRT if you've got symptoms, and and what we understand in terms of long-term impacts on the brain, it's certainly very clear that the greater doses of estrogen you have in your lifespan, whether they be this, you get this 1,000-fold dose of estrogen in a pregnancy, then you get in the entire rest of your life. So the more pregnancies you have, the more estrogen you have in your system through the lifespan, the more protected your brain is as you get older. It's more resilient to aging. So estrogen's a brain health, kind of a brain resilience builder. So we're banging on about hormones, they make me feel terrible. Actually, estrogen is really good and really healthy. We know that long-term, there is no evidence that HRT is causing dementia. It's probably neutral at this stage. The evidence is kind of neutral. It may be slightly protective, but there's certainly no recommendation take it to prevent Alzheimer's or dementia. But it's not causing it, it's not causing harm in that perspective.
So it's almost like weighing the risks, and outweighing it and seeing what's actually really going to benefit you. And would you say that one of the main, again, is it back to sleep in terms of the benefits of it, that you're going to have less emotional regulation or less brain fog if you're not having those disruptive nights?
Yeah, that's probably part of it, but we certainly know that women who are suffering only from brain fog and then are given HRT don't necessarily always, the brain fog just doesn't automatically lift. You've got to take this whole holistic approach. You can't just put everyone back in and everything's cured. You've got to be looking at all of the stuff, the food,
the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine.
Social connections. You've got to approach it from every angle here.
Oh, I think so, 100%. It's a jigsaw puzzle, and it's just one piece, isn't that? Isn't that right?
And I think we get to be a wee bit selfish at this point in life, don't we?
Well, I think we need our energy, as you say, because of all, absolutely. And we need to look after ourselves as best as we possibly can. Absolutely. I don't even think if it is selfish. I think it's selfless, because we're nicer and kinder, aren't we? When we've had a good night's sleep, and we're
there's this, kind of self kind of this, because people feel very defeated, and God, the whole world's just gone through those awful pandemic years, and we're still kind of clawing our way back from that. But I think, if you've got the wherewithal, to approach the kind of midlife as a, kind of a stage to sort of reassess what are we going to do for the second half, and how can we support ourselves to get through that healthy.
to thrive, isn't that right? Yeah. Move from survival to thriving. The second most upvoted question is from Karen, and she asked, how long is an ideal nap during the day? What is that? What is that magic number?
Well, I set my alarm on because I set an alarm. It's not like I magically wake up for 23 minutes. So there has been research done looking at the ideal length of a nap. And this is if you feel like having a nap. You can't force a nap on you. And I am a regular happy napper, but some days I just don't want one. But there are times when I am like, I can't even stay awake. But we understand from sleep science that when we first fall asleep, we typically go down into deep sleep within that first, sort of after about the first hour of sleep. And if you fall into deep sleep in the middle of the day, then it's going to disrupt your sleep later at night. We know that you get the benefits without the negative consequences if you don't sleep, if you sleep, but for no longer than half an hour. So this is why I call it a strategic nap. So you've kind of got to kind of figure out how to sort of slot that in and time it right. Because if you sleep too long, you go into deep sleep. It's harder to wake up and it wrecks your sleep that night. So no longer than half an hour.
And that's why people say they feel foggy or, they feel kind of like, fuzzy after it.
Because they've gone into deep sleep.
Yeah.
They've gone too long. They've gone too deep.
Okay.
Whereas you can even get the kind of the benefits from a much shorter nap than that. So that's why I say I set my clock alarm for 23 minutes because it'll take, if I decide I'm going to have a nap, I know I'm going to fall asleep within minutes. And that's just enough to kind of, and what that does is we have this buildup of a chemical in our brain called adenosine, and it kind of, the more and more and more we've got latching on to these receptors in our brain, the sleepier we feel. It's called sleep drive. And lots of people, that just biologically happens in the middle of the day. The sleep drive starts dialing up, and when you fall asleep, that all gets flushed away. Interestingly, that's the same chemical and receptor or neurochemical in the brain, a receptor that caffeine interferes with. So caffeine also kind of stops that receptor bumping on.
Okay.
But caffeine has other effects as well. So you can double up with a coffee nap, like drink the coffee, have the nap, wake up, and you've kind of flushed it out twice.
I've heard that, the coffee nap. Yeah. So that's even more strategic. So it's like, and the time of day then, Sarah, would you recommend it like before?
Well, I just follow my natural rhythms. And if I, so say today I got up at 5:30, I'll do some work now. I've got some calls. I'm going to go do a watercolor class.
I like to hear that.
I reckon by the time I get back this afternoon, I might go to the gym. I'll probably say I come home at 2:30. I guarantee I'll be like screaming. My body will be like nap.
Yes.
Like,
so your energy is in the morning. Like that's when you come alive. Yeah.
And I will indulge that, but I'll only do 20 minutes, 23 minutes. And I'll wake up and then I'll be fine. If I don't do that, then I'll be fighting that urge to nap, that sleep drive. I'll be fighting that for a couple of hours until say 4:30 it'll go away. I remember when I was at uni, and obviously, maybe you're a teacher or a lecturer or, you can't, not everyone can indulge their nap need.
That's true. I know.
I understand that.
Yes.
But if you can safely do it and it's you're not going to get fired or children aren't going to go missing.
Well, I think the world needs to change with that. Like we need to work with what it is to be human, don't we? I have a
friend who's a veterinarian, and she used to, she's retired now, but she said she used to always block the first clients out after lunch for her nap. So there's a lot of people have found their ways around it.
Yeah.
But obviously, you might be a teacher in a school. You can't do it.
Yeah, it's not always possible, but I think if there is a way, like, do find it.
And you have that drive. If your body isn't wanting to do it, you can't. I don't lie down and go, right now I must nap if I don't want to. I just go with it when I need it.
Yeah. But it's also because you're probably up so early. I mean, it's like by then, and you've done so much by the sounds of it. You're probably.
But then I'll go to bed. I'm in bed by 9. Australians and Irish, we have quite different body.
I think I'm Australian. I'm with you there. I'm a really early to bed, early to rise.
I'm an early riser. And you can't get a park. You can't get a park at the beach here at 6 a.m. All the surfers are down and.
Yeah, I remember being in Sydney and being like, we were staying with my sister-in-law and having jet lag and getting up. Like I remember, like that was early for me. It was like 5 in the morning or something, and going down and I saw Kieran's nephew there. He's like, "Good morning," and I was like, what are you doing up? And he was like, oh, I'm just hanging out before school. I was like, oh my God, it's like 5 a.m. For us, that's like, that's early. But okay, so let's see. Is there another question that's come in that's been upvoted here? So Shelley says, hi, Sarah and Fiona. I was wondering if you could give any advice, tips on how to build yourself back up emotionally after getting out of a very emotionally toxic and damaging relationship. I feel my hormone cycle is definitely linked to a slipping back into low mood at certain times of the month. I fall back and feel I have to start again. Okay, so it's almost like that's for both of us, because that whole emotional, it's like a therapist question in some ways.
I was going to say that's a therapist question.
It is, yeah.
You need to approach, and I say you've got to approach it from every angle. So what can you do personally to support your biological health with this, what we've been talking about, the sleep, exercise, so important, getting out in the world, nature, the social connections. But this is a question where the therapist needs to kind of swoop in and support that emotional. Yeah, recovery.
I suppose you'd be, it's hard to give a quick answer there, but I would say you'd be looking at what caused you to get into that emotionally toxic and damaging relationship, and trying to unpack that. And like you said earlier, Sarah, it's like, unraveling the stories that we've been telling ourselves since childhood, and maybe there's something in there that you have unconsciously and unintentionally being repeating. So it can be really worth looking at the relationship that you grew up in your own family. You learn a lot about how your parents were together, and how you viewed them, and maybe, unintentionally, as I said, you're kind of mirroring that in some way, or trying to fill something. But you
can't do that kind of unraveling alone, typically, I don't think.
Not really, no. I mean, that's one of the things I do, is I run therapy on the couch, which is a way to help people, and I guide them through journaling exercises, through meditations. You can do a lot in that way, and start to understand. I think understanding is so powerful. So you can let it go.
I always think therapy is a way of kind of getting everything out of your head and like laying it out in front of you, whereas if it's in here, and I know what's times it's happened to me, and it just goes round and round and round and round and round, and you ruminate, and it just grinds away inside of you, and you're not getting anywhere. You're just like sitting on a rocking chair going nowhere. Whereas if therapy gets it out in front of you and lays it out, and then you can kind of sort through it with a bit of distance and with other people's perspective.
Absolutely. It's really helpful. It is.
That's how it's always helped me.
Yeah, that's a really lovely way of describing it, Sarah. Being in a rocking chair on your own isn't much fun.
Going nowhere. You feel like you're quite busy.
Yes, but it's that.
But you're not moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah. We're just coming up to the end of the hour, but I know it's gone. We could keep going, couldn't we? It's like that watercolor class, forget all about it. No, you need to do that. That's fantastic. I love to hear people doing things like that for themselves, and just, making that time. I think it's so crucial. Before we wrap up though, you might let everybody here know about your new book, the title of your new book, when it's coming out, and I'm sure people will be really interested.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So the title is, I don't know whether Karen can transcribe, it's called Baby Brain, The Surprising Neuroscience of How Pregnancy and Motherhood Sculpt Our Brains and Change Our Minds for the Better. So again, I'm trying to move the story away from everything to do with hormones or women's health or women's brains or baby brain as this kind of negative. There's always this negative connotation associated with it, especially with motherhood. It's as if we become pregnant and you go to the bookshop and every photo will be of a woman from the neck down. It's as if, forget about that. You don't need your brain or your mind anymore. And that's not what the science shows. The science shows for all other mammals in the animal kingdom, and us human women too, that there are so many benefits to pregnancy and motherhood, to our brains, to our brain health. Obviously there are some downsides, but there is cognitive enhancement. We tend to focus on the forgetfulness. There is this exquisite kind of change whereby we become very, very tuned in to emotions, to be able to read other people's faces, to interpret babies' cries. Pregnancy doesn't just prepare our bodies for, carrying a baby and then nourishing it when it's born, if we choose to breastfeed, it also prepares our mind for impending motherhood, and it puts our brains in this exquisite state of neuroplasticity where we're primed to learn, where we're focused in on this new little being, and you know, all of our social brain structures go through quite significant changes, so we become much more socially attuned. There's just so many benefits, and really interestingly, in middle life women and elderly women, we can still see traces of you know, pregnancy and early motherhood in their brains, whereby mothers' brains are more resilient in later life, so long as you don't have too many children, because that can be a bit stressful. But you know, there are enormous benefits, but we tend to, again, you know, you become pregnant, let's just look at your belly, you become this kind of headless, useless, ditzy character.
You still have your brain, of course, and what's going on.
You do. And there's a lot of research showing improved memory and cognitive enhancement and strategy and capability. That is, again, if it's not talked about, women aren't going to know it's a possibility.
Yeah, exactly. I think that
just trying to change, rebrand baby brain, rebrand mummy brain, just kind of introduce a new story into this narrative we have about motherhood, where it's as if we kind of lose our cognitive capacity. We spent years fighting for our rights in the workplace as mothers, and yet we still seem quite happy to carry on with the narrative that we're a wee bit useless.
Back to the stories we're telling ourselves. And
there's a bunch of stories that are not based in the science, so let's tell us stories that are much more
Sarah,
empowering.
I can see this as a huge success and helping so many women, because, you know, really changing that narrative will make such a difference, you know.
Diana says, we didn't have baby brain in the 70s. We didn't have it in New Zealand either.
I've heard you say that,
I never knew it was a thing, so I didn't have it.
So that you didn't have it. So it just shows you, doesn't it, the power of belief, really, and what we tell ourselves. It's amazing. There's a lovely comment from Anita. Love how passionate and vibrant you both are presenting. Aww. Well, Sarah, I 100% concur with Anita there for your amazing energy and enthusiasm, and I can't tell you how grateful I am. It's just so amazing to have you here. And
oh no, it's been well, next time I'm in Dublin, we'll have to connect face to face. We have a little reunion.
Wait and see, exactly, with Catherine and Jeff and everyone. Be lovely to see. And please do give my regards.
It's funny,
to
there
Jeff.
was some comment, I think, in your social media, and it was like, is that neuroscientist who married Jeff Gill?
Just so
I was telling my husband, I said,
oh God,
you're married to that neuroscientist.
Yeah, that one.
That one.
Yeah, I don't know how many other neuroscientists are married.
It's been fun for him to know that we've got this connection.
Yeah, and me too. It's amazing. I mean, because we're so used to it in Ireland, like we all know each other, like, you know, but when you have an international guest, you know, and you think from Australia or lives in Sydney, from New Zealand, you know, you think there's pretty little chance, and there you go.
Small world.
Yeah, small world. So Sarah, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your nap, your 23-minute nap. Don't go a second over.
No, I won't.
And we'll keep in touch, and thank you to everybody who's been here, and I really truly hope it's helpful. The recording is going to be available, and we'll send it to people tomorrow. If you weren't here on the live, you will get the recording tomorrow. So thank you so much again, Sarah, and the best of luck as well with your new book. I'll certainly be is it available for pre-order or not?
I should say it's globally on Amazon Digital. Or wherever you buy your digital books.
Yeah.
It's paper in Australia and New Zealand initially. Hopefully it'll be popular enough, and they'll send the paper versions that'll, you know, get picked up in the UK and Ireland or Europe. But you'll be able to we'll be able to ship, like, you know, paper copies out, but it'll come out on April 26th. Digitally, globally. However you say that in a more professional publishing sense.
I'm not quite sure. I haven't got there yet. But I do.
You can download me onto your Kindle.
I wish you the very, very best of luck with it, and the whole publicity around it, and the audio book, and all of that. Mind to yourself when it comes along. Yeah. So lots of love, Sarah, and thank you again to everyone. Thanks to Kieran as always.
It's been a joy.
It's been a joy. Yes.
Yeah.
Lots of love, Sarah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.